Welcome to Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here is the podcast host, James Delingpole.
Welcome to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special, exciting and unexpected guest. I have never met Chloe before, and I met her on the platform of the station just now. I mean, not randomly, obviously we arranged it, but she's amazing. I mean, even the 5 minutes I've spent talking to her, I just know I totally love her. She's an adorable. No, you are. And I'm not just blowing smoke at your ass. You are the future. Ooh. Thank you. That's Chloe's coffee.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're actually in a hotel, and I like to think that all the kind of staff think that Chloe and I are having an affair because she's got a suitcase.
I'm going away this weekend. I have a suitcase, and they kind of looked at us quite strangely, like, who is this older man?
Is she his daughter, or is no? She's carrying a suitcase, and he's carrying a bag. Yeah. Chloe, on Twitter, your name is Low Tax Chloe, which is quite a weird coincidence that your parents christened you that, isn't it?
It is quite a weird coincidence. They hadn't foreseen that I'd be fighting for lower taxes. It's hard to know whether or not, I went on this path because of my name, Low Tax Chloe, on my birth certificate, or whether it happened naturally.
Nominative determinism.
Exactly.
No, but it's not your real name, is it? Your real name is Chloe
Chloe Westley.
And you're Australian?
I'm from Australia. I'm from Brisbane. I've been in the UK for about 6 years now.
Right.
And I moved here for university and just absolutely fell in love with it. And it's my home. But I do understand why some people are a bit surprised that there's this Australian going on TV and campaigning and saying we should leave the EU and have lower taxes. I appreciate it might be a bit strange, but it's my home now, and I want to make this country better, and I have family here, so
we need your
I do
help.
have some skin in the game.
Yeah. Well, do you ever get that? Do you ever get, like, look, what business is it of yours to be talking about?
Yes.
Do you?
Yeah, predominantly from people who disagree with me. So I've been told several times to go back to where I came from by people with EU flags in their Twitter handle. And there was one MP, I think it was Stephen Doherty, who said, why is this Australian on TV or something? And I mean, that really upset me because I don't think just because someone's an immigrant it means that they're disqualified from having a say in the future of the country.
Yeah.
I didn't just get off the plane like Barack Obama, do a speech and go home. I've been here for quite a while now.
So you're now at the Taxpayers Alliance.
Yes.
Which is definitely one of the most effective think tanks, isn't it?
I would say so. Not so much at the moment, because we have quite a left-wing government in power. But in the past, there have been huge policy victories, especially when it comes to local government in particular. So there isn't a lot of scrutiny on how councils spend money, particularly on staff salaries. So one of our biggest reports every year is the Town Hall Rich List, that we look into the top-paid bureaucrats in local government. And that resulted in the government making local councils publish their salaries every year. Which was a huge policy victory. But yeah, lots of our war on waste has resulted in lots of money being saved for taxpayers. And George Osborne and David Cameron were quite responsive to some of the policy proposals. But this current government, not so much.
You mean what you're saying is that Theresa May is even worse than David Cameron, which is pretty impressive.
On issues of taxation and spending, I would say yes.
Well, on every other issue too, surely. I mean, she's got to be about the worst prime minister ever.
I wouldn't say the worst prime minister ever, and I have a bit of respect for Theresa May as an individual. I don't dislike her at all. I just think that she is not the person that needs to be leading the country right now at this very important time. I don't think she wants to be leading the country right now. I don't get the feeling that she's really excited about this time where Britain is taking back its independence, or whether she has any vision for what to do with that independence. And I can't help but think this country would be thriving more under the leadership of someone who really did believe in Brexit and in the future. I
can tell, you haven't actually said it, and I haven't read you on the subject, but I can tell from your tone that your position on Brexit is a bit like mine. I mean, I was in a movie, did you see Brexit the movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great movie.
And Martin Durkin, great man, and my vision of Britain's future outside the EU is his future, welcoming, freebooting, free trade, just like an island sitting on the edge of Europe, putting it to shame, putting its communitarian, sclerotic nature to shame. And we're going to be a bit like the Singapore or the Hong Kong of the English Channel. Is that where you'd like to be?
Definitely. When people say, oh dear, we'd be like the Singapore of Europe, that to me sounds like a fantastic position, thriving, a global hub for enterprise and research, and people with high living standards and fantastic infrastructure. I mean, that sounds like a very positive vision to me. I don't understand why there are so many, particularly older MPs and Lords, that are so tied to this backwards EU project, which is completely out of date. The Customs Union was formulated in the 1950s and 60s, single market in the 1980s, before the internet became a huge part of how we do business, and before traveling by air was a really big thing. So the world is changing, and the way in which countries interact and do business and way businesses do business is changing. The EU is completely out of date, and it's not fit for purpose in the 21st century, and Britain could be.
Well, I tell you what I don't get. One of the many things I don't get about this current regime. So you've got Philip Hammond, who presumably made a lot of money out of as a businessman. So he's not averse to the idea of people making their fortune, sending their kids to Eton, as he's done, and the rest. And yet now he's Chancellor, and he's very left-leaning Chancellor. And the one occasion where he's talked about the kind of role outside Europe that you and I would like for Britain, he was using it as a threat. Do you remember?
Yes.
He's saying, like, if you're difficult, we're going to do this dangerous thing where we're going to drop our taxes. And I'm thinking, why is that a threat? Why doesn't he just do that anyway?
Exactly. And Guy Verhofstadt, I believe, said that this would give Britain an unfair advantage. So it accepted if Britain lowered a lot of these regulatory burdens that have been imposed on us by the EU and lowered taxes, foreign investment in this country would skyrocket, business would boom, Britain could become a global hub for business. It already is, by the way. It's probably second, so London is second to Silicon Valley in terms of tech startups and digital.
My brother,
so
my little brother is one of those tech startups.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
and he's going to be, his company is going to be, I would say, one of the next... Well, I don't know. After Revolut, that's a unicorn. It's going to be one of the next unicorns. He's a genius, and he's in London, not in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, well, that's great news.
Well, it's exciting, isn't it?
It is exciting.
Why aren't we embracing this?
I don't know.
How could you not want an unfair advantage over this failing socialist superstate?
Because of course, when you have, we talk about foreign investment and business booming, but what does that mean for ordinary people? That means more jobs, more opportunities, higher wages, standards of living going up. And I care a lot about people that are struggling in society, and people assume because of the organisation that I work for that I don't really care about anyone who doesn't have a lot of money, but I really do. I do a lot of volunteering, and when I speak to people that are struggling, they want a job. Like the one of the most rewarding things that I got to do over Christmas, I was doing some work for some food banks, was help a young man apply for a job, and he was excited. And people don't want to be doing nothing with their lives. They want these opportunities. And if we had a bold government that could say, you know what, you've got Socialist Corbyn and his backward ideas, you've got the backwards EU, you're going to take us out of the EU, lower taxes, lower regulation, and let this country thrive, because it's not just about helping business in the abstract, it's about helping people that are helped by more jobs being created, by more businesses being created and thriving.
I had to talk to a bunch of Cambridge students the other night, of which more in a moment, because this is just this is going to make your something bad happen to you, I think, when you hear the story. But I was talking to them about why it is that conservatism is a good thing, and I don't think it's immediately obvious to the younger generation, because they've been fed so much propaganda on conservatism being heartless and it being about a kind of an establishment elite preserving its its interests. And of course, part of the problem with that at the moment is that that's indeed what you've got with the Conservative Party. They actually want to pull up the drawbridge. You've got all the Remainers basically want the status quo, which has benefited their class for decades. And I think that we need something more revolutionary than that. I think the conservatism I believe in does not laud central bankers as gods. It does not prop up too big to fail businesses, banks and so on. It acknowledges that capitalism is a process of creative destruction, and it does believe in the workers. Absolutely. How can you... I don't see how anyone in any conscience can be a Conservative and not want opportunities for ordinary people to pull themselves up and have a better life and boost the economy.
I mean, I definitely wouldn't go around working for this organisation and putting myself out there if I didn't really believe that these ideas would help millions of people. Yeah. I find it very strange when I speak to left-wing friends of mine or journalists, and their assumption is that I'm a millionaire and I'm a terrible person, and when they find out that I'm neither, I am. Yeah. I wish I was a millionaire. But when they hear me talk about how I want to help people, they're surprised, and I think that's a bit of a shocking indictment on the way in which conservatism has been argued for over the past decade or so. A lot of the Conservatives that go out there as MPs and candidates and even in cabinet, I don't think they really believe in these ideas that I believe in. And that's very concerning to me, because we should have two political parties with different ideas, not one political party with a very high tax, high spend agenda, and another political party with a slightly less spend, slightly, not even, I don't even know if they would have less taxes than Corbyn, I don't know. But we've got Labour and Labour Light, and this country deserves different ideas. And if we make those arguments, I think people will be open to hearing them, but we haven't been making those arguments.
They don't bother to make the arguments. They're frightened to make the arguments. I mean, I think to a degree it's the job of people like us to move the Overton window so that the public debate moves in a kind of more rightward direction. At the same time, though, I really get the impression, and actually I've had this confirmed by somebody who knows about the inner workings of the Conservative Party and the members of the cabinet and so on, that there are lots of people who are prominent Conservative MPs who really aren't interested in Conservative ideology at all. They're there a bit like your Malcolm Turnbull is. They're not real Conservatives. It's just the party of convenience to get them a political career.
It's which political party could I get a job with to be a politician so I can spend my life standing in the House of Commons, making speeches and feeling important. I don't think this of every MP. I've met some incredible MPs across the House. Gisela Stewart, actually, oddly, has been one of my heroes and one of my mentors.
She's great.
She's fantastic.
She's a Labour MP. Was a Labour MP for Birmingham.
Yes.
She was prominent in the Brexit campaign.
Very prominent.
She was articulate. She was principled, wasn't she?
She was, and she's one of the MPs that I've met, former MPs, that really does have ideas that she believes in and wants to change things. So there are brilliant people like that in Parliament at the moment, but there aren't enough.
No.
And we need more to stick their neck out for ideas that they believe in, and less to just go with what public opinion is. And I'm really concerned about this growing status quo, that more spending and more taxes is a good thing. And also this assumption that people should just pay their taxes, keep their head down and shut up, and not try and have any say in how their lives are run or how their money is spent. It's shocking when we expose that taxpayers and it's huge amounts of waste in governments, in local and national government. We receive a lot of criticism from people saying, you can't believe you're doing this, it's so evil. It's like, no, this is needed. You can't just expect people to pay their taxes and then not look into it or not have access to information about how that's spent. It's very, very important, regardless of where you stand in the political sphere.
Yeah. So I was distracted now. I was thinking, you speak English really well.
Oh, thank you. For an Australian, do you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
You've actually, I'd say you've lost a degree of your accent, haven't you?
A little bit.
You've definitely picked up English. You could pass. I mean, if there's a war between England and Australia, not that there would be.
Or the Ashes.
If there were a war, you could be quite a good
spy.
Good spy.
Oh, that's good to know.
For your country.
Thank you.
Can I ask, how were you always an evil right-wing bitch,
given that I grew up with the name Lojax Chloe.
Yeah.
No, not really. I flirted a lot with socialist ideas as a teenager, as I think every young person does, and I studied philosophy at university. And I knew that I erred on the side of personal freedom, but I was open to new ideas.
Where were you at university?
Heathrow College, University of London. It's a philosophy college.
Right. Okay.
It's closing down, unfortunately, because I think it's a subject going out of fashion with people. But I had an amazing time.
Was the course predominantly lefty, and were your students? Yeah, it was.
Oh yes.
tutors or professors or whatever couldn't even countenance the idea that there might be some arguments on the right. So
they were very patient. I found the professors were more open than the students to having debates about politics. And even if they did have very strong political views, they certainly didn't make them known in the classroom, which is, I think, shows a bit of intellectual integrity on their part. And a lot of the subjects I did were not necessarily political as well. Metaphysics, the meaning of life, all that douchey stuff that you read about with the continental philosophers. I loved it.
What you mean? You don't mean what? Not the postmodernists, not Derrida and Foucault and stuff.
I did read Derrida and Foucault. I thought I just really wasn't sure what they. I wrote essays about them and I engaged with the ideas, but it bored me immensely. I mean,
you engage with their ideas.
I'm a very down to the point. I like short sentences, arguments, like say what you think. And they spent 20 pages often saying what they could have said in one sentence.
But isn't obfuscation the whole point?
Oh yeah.
I think the same applies to Marxist dialectic, that it's not meant to be understood. It's a sort of anti-thought in a way, that if you understand it, then you've failed.
Yeah, quite. It's for people that are very wealthy and educated to sit around in cafes and talk about for hours. It's not to be applicable to the real world. That these aren't necessarily ideas that I think help anyone. It's just intellectual snobbery.
It's interesting you say that because, as you know, we Brexiteers are constantly told that we are on the uneducated side of the argument, and that the people who voted just didn't know what they were so thick. They hadn't done gender studies. Not one of them had done gender studies at uni.
Exactly.
And so, because they lacked this training and insight, they foolishly voted in their own selfish, stupid interest.
They spend their days running businesses, raising families and engaging in the real world. How could they possibly be able to make decisions about the future of this country? And what really fascinated me after the vote was this characterization of Leavers as being uneducated and I think poor. It was people didn't want to say it, but the idea was lower class people voted Leave because they were uneducated. And I think, you know what, damn straight. Of course people without a lot of money living in London in their huge flats voted Leave because the EU wasn't working for them. So when these people make these arguments about those in the lower society voting Leave, they don't realise that what they're pointing out is that, yes, the EU was hurting those communities a lot more than the Islington Champagne socialists.
Yeah. If you're sitting on a London property and you've seen what quantitative easing has done to the value of your property, the very last thing you'll want to do is rock the boat that has been making you more in increased value of your house than your income. I mean, who would want to? People vote in their own interest, don't they?
They
and
do.
One of the things I've noticed about the new class is what Martin Durkin calls the new class, which is basically the kind of bien pensant liberal elite, is that they delude themselves that ordinary people, working class people that they've never encountered, are really, really thick, that they can't make calculations. For example, they think that if they put single mothers higher up the housing queue, they don't believe that they're incentivising single motherhood. But they are, because that's how people react. The working class are rational and quick. And I think we need to get over this notion that ordinary people are stupid. I think Brexit proves that they're not.
Well, there's a different kind of intelligence to... There's practical intelligence, there's reasoning, and then there's going to university and doing a douchey subject like philosophy, like I did. Yeah. I would say...
Hey, hang on a second. Roger Scruton is a philosopher. You
well,
can't
that's
say
very true.
He's not a douche.
No, he's definitely not. No. But I'm just being self-deprecating.
Yeah,
very
yeah.
British. It's a thing I've picked up since moving to Britain.
Do they not do self-deprecation in Australia?
No, we're very proud of who we are.
Right.
We're braggers, actually. I think that's apparent when we win the Ashes and sports events. Australians
I've seen
very proud people.
I've seen a hint of exulting when you win the Ashes, and
I mean, when the cheating scandal came out, a lot of my British friends had their revenge on me. I apologise.
I may once have teased one of my Australian friends on that very subject. In fact, I think I rang him up about 3 or 4 times that day to remind him of the tearful Australian... I mean,
it was very over the top, wasn't it?
Hang on a second, though. How do you feel about that? Your cricket team, your national pride, blubbing over...
That was embarrassing. I would have respected these cricketers to come out and say, you know what? Yeah, we're a bit cheeky. We cheated, but we won. and then mic drop. That would have been fantastic.
Wouldn't that have been so
That'd have
cool?
been great.
I would have felt proud to be Australian
Yeah,
at that
yeah.
moment. But I
No, we shouldn't be proud of cheating. I mean, the reason why they were crying is because sports is such an important part of Australian culture, and the idea of
it is Australian culture.
Yeah, the idea of a fair go, because we're a very egalitarian society. We're all convicts and free settlers from the dregs of British society, as some of my friends say. So we have a very egalitarian culture. So cheating is not on.
Do you know what? I agree with you on that point. I think if you're going to cheat at, despite what I said earlier, where I sort of jokingly suggested it was a good thing, if you're going to cheat at sport or games, I can't abide people who cheat at Monopoly, at
It's a
Risk,
disgrace, isn't it?
I don't know how you cheat during Settlers of Catan or Carcassonne, but it's possible, I suppose. But look, you've got to play by the rules. Otherwise, I mean, all is lost, isn't it?
I think so. I think it's the social contract, and the once you break someone's trust, you can never get it back.
Oh my God! I've just had remembered a conversation I had the other night at Cambridge with in a pub. Unfortunately, I had a couple of double gins by that point. But somebody was talking to me about the nature of thought crime. And have you thought about this?
Very much so. Well, am I allowed to?
Well, no. I mean.
Please don't tell the thought police.
No.
I have some very dangerous thoughts about things.
About the thought that, and who was it who was saying? Was it Lacan? No. Somebody in the 1960s. You know about this? I'm sort of going on the edge of my knowledge here, and I was a few sheets to the wind.
What was the idea? What was the argument?
It was that our culture at the moment has created this Orwellian thought crime and made it real. And then actually the nature of being a human is that we all think bad thoughts, but we police ourselves, and that internal mechanism is what keeps us decent and good. We don't need, and this is going to segue into the next section of this podcast, we don't need, when we go up to university, we don't need classes to teach us how not to rape. Mm-hmm. We know rape is bad. Culturally, we're imbued with the idea that our parents have taught us at school. We know it's not a good thing. But now we're in a culture where the SJW left has come to dominate the values of the SJW left, and it's rather scary.
Well, they also have consent classes, which
that's what I mean. Yeah.
I'm not entirely opposed to it if it's voluntary and they want to speak to students
It's
about
not
being
voluntary,
sensible. Well, I just think by the time you go to university, if you haven't been told you shouldn't rape or sexually assault someone, then something's gone seriously wrong in your upbringing at home with your parents and at school.
Yeah.
What I'm concerned with so I assume we can talk about the Me Too movement. Shall we get onto that?
We will, but we're going to do it because I can see that this section, the special listener, special friend, is sitting there thinking, they are really, really spoiling me. We've gone into 23 minutes already. Okay. So we're going to have a pause, maybe order another coffee, and then we're going to...
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole. More in a moment.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
I think that it's the epitome of hypocrisy. Unless you fall in line with their liberal agenda, this uniparty, globalist, liberal agenda, they will never support you. They use the whole gender issue, of course, as some kind of tool to prop up their messaging, but it's the phoniest thing.
Sirius XM Patriot Channel 125. This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my new, very special guest, Chloe Westley, aka Low Tax Chloe, who's Australian, but you almost wouldn't know it.
Really?
No, well, almost. Now, Chloe, listen, I'm really glad that I've got you on the podcast because, I get people saying, why don't you get more women on? But you know what? I think slightly it's because there are not that many women around these days who haven't been tainted by the evil. It's like The Walking Dead. I think loads of them have been zombified by feminism.
Or they're too afraid to say what they really think, because the backlash, if you do, for example, say something like the gender pay gap is a myth and a useless statistic, is extraordinary.
Is it? So the sisterhood are worse than...
They can be very nasty, and I think a lot of women just can't be bothered to take them on it because there are a couple of us out there trying to make the case, but I also think there are more interesting things to talk about, like Brexit and the economy. And I don't want to just be asked on media to talk about women's issues all the time, but on women's issues and on the idea of gender equality, I think a lot of women agree with me, but probably can't be bothered to put their name to it because the backlash is extraordinary. And then you're called a betrayer of the sex, and it gets very nasty.
I think you're right. I think most women in the real world, well, I think there's statistics to demonstrate this. I think very few women self-define as feminists. It's only in kind of chattering class media circles and politics, obviously, that women get into this stuff. But I want to tell you about this horrific experience I had the other night.
Okay.
At Cambridge.
What happened?
Okay, so I had to give a speech. I was the guest of honour, and I'll tell you, this is really sad because they invited me, and I mean, I think they really regret inviting me, which is sad because you think these kids they like my stuff, they love the podcast, and they think I'm going to be really entertaining, and I was hoping I was going to be really entertaining too, and I wanted to give them a speech about conservatism and about why we fight and all the other stuff. Anyway, so I thought, well, given that it's the Cambridge University Conservative Association, probably the last island of truth and beauty in a sea of communitarian kind of bilge, political correctness, I thought, I'll be a bit edgy, I'll give it. So I was thinking, I was trying to describe the massive difference between how university was when I was at university and how it is now. I mean, it was almost kind of Brideshead 2 when I was at Oxford, and now it's just like SJW hell. Particularly at Oxford and Cambridge, actually. I think
I have heard this.
The Ivy Leagues have got it really bad. Anyway, so I was making my speech, and I was saying, to use a really crass analogy, a crass, tasteless analogy, which I'm sure you'll appreciate. It was as if Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris had got into a time machine in the 1970s and accidentally found themselves looking out for Top of the Pops in 2018 and discovering that there are no longer these underage girls to seduce. And I just thought, it's kind of a bit, it's cheap, but it's kind of funny in a kind of crass
very
way.
Crass.
Very
crass.
And these girls stood up and walked out.
Oh, really?
And muttering under their breath about how disgusted they were.
Okay.
And and at this point, when people walk out of a speech, when you've been invited as the guest of honour, you kind of think, oh my God, I haven't got the whole audience with me. And when you do public speaking, you feed on the enthusiasm and laughter of your audience, and if you get wrong-footed, even your funny moments cease to be funny, and even your serious points that they get blunted. So I soldiered on, and it was, but I could see that, oddly enough, the kind of people in charge of the society, they all started distancing themselves from me and treating me like a leper, and which is rather awkward. But some of the other people who'd been there said, "No, well done, mate. I loved your speech, and I really like what you said and stuff." So I went out to the pub afterwards for some consolation drinks with those lads who were prepared to talk to me, and there was the girl who'd walked out with her bestie, and I suspect they'd probably had a few, and they'd got even more hysterical. And I was standing talking to these chaps, and suddenly the landlord of the pub came up to me and said, "You've got to go." And I said, "What?" He said, "You've got to leave my pub. There's been a complaint about you." I said, "What?" "Apparently you've been saying some really offensive things about rape to a young woman." And he was... Had it not been for the intervention of about five undergraduates who were just pleading on my behalf, I would have been chucked out of the pub for something I'd said, for an analogy, in a speech, in another building, that had upset this woman. Now, I tell you what bothered me about this, was the kind of this sort of weaponized grievance that seems to have afflicted young women. They've been trained in this world, and I'll give you a chance to talk on this in a moment, but I'm quite fired up about this, is that they've been brought up in the world where, A, that men are these evil oppressors, that it's a patriarchal society that they must resist, and it's terribly unfair that there's this gender pay gap, that men are wrong in every way, they've got to fight desperately back with whatever feeble skills they can, and that the culture's against them. And we've got a situation where, for example, the CPS, under that awful woman, Alison Saunders, was so desperate to put young men in prison that she seemed to create a state of affairs where the police were withholding evidence that showed the men to be innocent. So you can see that it's swung completely the wrong way. I mean, yeah, sure, the patriarchy has been a problem in its time, but at the moment we've got this vindictive matriarchy, and it worries me, particularly about young women. Older women, people of my generation, they're fine. If you listen to Sarah Vine's podcast last week, she's great, really robust and tan. But the whole Me Too phenomenon, all that, I'm worried.
Well, I mean, on the issue of the joke you made, I think freedom of speech means that you can make that joke, and they can walk out, they can come up to the pub and have a go at you, and then you can have a go back, and that's freedom of speech. It's also, it means that it's self-policing, and if that joke was so offensive and everyone walked out, then you would be kind of do you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to kick people out and of pubs. These things should be resolved on a one-to-one basis. I can use my freedom of speech to make a really crass joke, and you can say, Chloe, don't say that about the English cricket team. And welcome to free and liberal societies. I'm very concerned about the way in which speech and jokes are being policed at the moment, online and otherwise. On the issue of the Me Too movement, I am concerned as well, and I'm concerned about the implications in the workplace in particular. I think workplace segregation is going to start taking place. Employees are going to worry about inviting female colleagues and male colleagues to the same drinking event, or there might be, Netflix put out this document where they advise employees to avoid any sexual harassment claims. Don't make eye contact with someone for more than 5 seconds. Don't ask for their phone number. That's very concerning. But also, I thought sexual liberation was about doing what you want and keeping the government and the state out of the bedroom. None of your business. We're in control of our own lives. We can wear what we want and say what we want. And there seems to be this middle-class, prudish backlash towards that, which we saw with the Grid Girls, where it was lots of... women... Feminism started out about women having choices, and I want choices, I want opportunities, I want to wear what I want and live in a liberal society where I don't have to wear a headdress or anything, and I can if I want, but I'm not forced to hide the sexual part of myself like in many Eastern countries. So I'm very concerned. I don't know what to do about it, but I also have noticed that when people like you, men, speak out make arguments that you're making now about feminism, you are, I think, unfairly treated and called all kinds of names. And I think women like me probably need to come out and say, hold up, I'm not okay with this SJW, all men are evil mentality either.
I think it's got to come from your species, Chloe, because, look, as you say, when men say it, we're like so evil that of course we're going to say that because we are the phallocentric oppressor. But I'm coming at this from the perspective of somebody who's got a daughter that, he thinks is like the best thing, because all dads adore their daughters, and I want her to live in a world where she's not threatened with being raped, and where obviously she gets equal rights and so on. But at the same time, I'm seeing now a world where she's being granted advantages that my sons don't have. They are discriminated against. She's got the golden path laid out in front of her by this new culture, and suppose that between school and university she wanted to earn a bit of money by being a grid girl. Well, that's no longer open to her. How can it be right that feminism denies women the chance to earn a living out of their looks if they're able to do so?
I think it's snobbery, actually. That's what I interpreted that particular campaign. It's like these girls were being paid to be beautiful, and they were beautiful, and they were gorgeous, and they felt empowered by that job. I don't think that's a bad thing. But if you do, that's fine. Go out on TV and say that you disagree with it, but don't campaign to ban them from earning a living. That's really extreme. But I also hope we can get to the point in society where we stop judging each other based on our physical characteristics. I think that's so in the past. Like, we're getting to to a point now where more and more young people in particular disagree with this identity politics. That one characteristic, your gender, your nationality, your race, or even your age, has to determine how you're treated in the world. I would like to get to a point where we are treated as individuals and we can not make assumptions about people based on physical characteristics. It's a very backwards idea. I don't think society can be put into boxes.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Jordan Peterson's written some great stuff on this, and his talks on identity politics are fantastic. He's much better at making this case than I am, but I agree with him that if you go to the nth degree of identity politics and box people up in their different characteristics, what you end up with, actually, is finding out that the individual is the minority. And we are individuals.
Yeah. What scares me is the pace of change. It's like the zombies in World War Z. They move so quickly that they're on you before you can escape over the wall into Israel, but they swim over the wall as well. But for example, I remember a few years ago when I first became conscious of this political correctness ruining everything, and I remember sort of doing a reductio ad absurdum, which was, are good-looking people going to be discriminated against? Are they going to be rationed according to how many sexual partners they have because it's unfair that they get more sex than ugly people? And I meant this as a joke, as a kind of, this is never going to happen. But that's what's happening with the Grid Girls. It's also what happened, I think, at that dinner, the President's Club dinner that was exposed. We were all supposed to be grateful that these rich people were in future not going to have an event where they raise lots of money for charity with lots of attractive young girls serving them, because clearly it's quite wrong for young girls to earn money by dressing up in skimpy outfits and flirting with millionaires to get more money out of them. I didn't see that as a victory for women or for society. I just thought it was...
Yeah, I'm undecided on this one, because I think, yes, we should have the choice to go to an event like that, wear something a bit revealing and make money from being beautiful. At the same time, don't be a dickhead. If a girl's walking past, don't slap her. Or, I mean, I think...
No, you and I totally agree on this. The idea that some sort of fat, drunken arsehole...
It's a bit gross, isn't it?
Keep
your hands to yourself.
Totally gross, but one likes to think that they wouldn't have done that they'd have... I hope they would have... that's the thing, that men are men, but we do have societal codes. I was thinking about this the other day about one of my favourite works of literature, Gawain and the Green Knight. Do you know it?
I haven't read it.
No, okay, it's really good. Okay. But the whole courtly system of chivalric behaviour, it evolved in part to stop men being rapists. The idea, this yes. idealisation of women and so on. It was the culture of the time signalling that women...
We're delicate flowers.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean...
And men, keep it in your pants.
I'm not... Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that you'd necessarily have got on in 15th century England. You might have found it a bit...
I think I would have got a bit bored sitting at home and... But who knows? Who knows? Different times. But I'm really glad that I live in this time and not them, because I am sexually liberated. I am free. We do have the contraceptive pill. We did have this amazing time in the 1960s onwards of all this music and art and everything celebrating the female and the male form and male beauty. And I hope we don't start to go back on that and start to make flirting a no-no and taking risks a no. I think flirting is very important, and it's a risk. And what's interesting is sometimes it goes well and sometimes it goes very badly, and it depends on whether or not it's reciprocated. And I think a lot of, not all of them, but some of these Me Too stories that I've read are just cases of men getting it really wrong, and they think that she likes him and she doesn't, and he kisses her and she goes, oh no. But I think that's kind of the game.
That's kind of absolutely.
I have definitely approached men, asked them out for coffee, and they might have felt uncomfortable and they didn't like me, and I hope I haven't made them feel uncomfortable. But that's kind of the risk you take. And there is a line between flirting, getting it wrong, and genuine predatory behaviour. And I hope that as well, this Me Too movement doesn't blur the line between the two and say that someone who is physically violent and rapes someone is equivalent to putting their arm around them at the cinema and being told, oh, actually, I don't like you, don't do that.
Yes, I mean, you do have that option at your disposal. The option of shrinking away and saying, actually, I like you, but not in that way, kind of thing.
It's happened to me. I've been rejected that way before.
Have you?
I have.
Oh no, Chloe.
No, I think
No.
so. Okay, so I
Horrid.
did like someone, and then he had a girlfriend, and it was fine. It was awkward after that, but it was fine. But I have sympathy for men and women in this new dating world, because I think we're all scared now of offending each other.
I'm so glad that I'm not on the market, because I wouldn't like to go in this. In my day, and this was another thing that got me into trouble during my speech. In my day, in order to get laid, we would get drunk and make sure that the other person was drunk in order to overcome our English inhibitions, and maybe it would lead to something, maybe it wouldn't. I mean, there was no sort of rape involved. It was kind of two young people sort of unsure of themselves, trying to get into a position where they could...
It's very awkward, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, being young and meeting people of the opposite sex and the dating world, it is very awkward. You don't have to engage in it, by the way. If you would like to still live in the Victorian age
become
and
an
be
incel.
courted, exactly. Yeah, well, maybe. That's fine. But if you do want to go out and have a drink and flirt with people, it can get awkward, and it's important that we have a distinction between awkward flirting and awkward sexual encounters and bad behaviour, which is actually illegal, immoral, and the worst possible thing that you could do to another human being, I think, other than kill them, is to take away that part of themselves and be a predator.
I've noticed that a lot of young men seem to be much less interested these days than my generation of young men was in women and sex and stuff. They seem almost... They haven't become incels exactly, but I think they've rather formed the view that women aren't worth the hassle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is
dear.
sad.
That
well,
is
bad
sad.
for you, Chloe.
It is bad for me. Oh, no. Is there any hope?
But the thing is, look, you're normal. Except, I mean, in terms of what... percentages, you're probably not normal. You're probably really abnormal now. I mean, you're like somebody from the past when things were good.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of my female friends agree with me, though.
Do they?
It's just the ones that have the loudest voices on these issues tend to be very prudish and have a victimhood complex and are out to get all men. I think those are the loud voices, but I hope that young men don't think that just because there are many loud feminists saying that men shouldn't walk up to a girl and ask them for coffee, that's sexual harassment. I hope they don't think that's representative of my entire gender.
Well, one of the interesting things that about my Dread Cambridge experience was that in the discussions before my disastrous speech, we established that it was only a very shrill minority of perhaps maybe 20% of the university which believed all this SJW stuff, and that everyone else mostly went along to get along for a quiet life. So we had this incident where 2 or 3 hysterical girls weaponized their sense of grievance and used it to kind of, well, almost get me thrown out of the pub, to ruin the mood of the evening, everything. But what saddened me, and I don't blame them for this because it's a very scary culture we live in, is the way that the reaction of a lot of the people was to distance themselves from me rather than saying, well, hang on a second, this is just ridiculous, mate. Don't worry about it. We've got your back. If we want this stuff to stop, we have to be more active in fighting it.
I agree. And not just on the issue of gender relations, but also on many different issues. We need to stop being so bloody polite about what we think. I think the people on the extreme side of the left and on a lot of these issues are very loud, and they don't care who they offend. They go out there and they say their piece. I think my side, well, our side, the libertarian side, we are very apologetic about our beliefs often. And you're right, there is, even when it comes to Brexit, that I have friends who agree with me but don't want to come out. Or if someone was shouting at me, a Remainer, they wouldn't come to my defence.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why that is.
Well, I think it's because we live in a culture where we are told that conservatives are selfish.
Oh, we are evil, aren't we?
We are
very evil, yes.
The fundamental difference between the left and the right is that we think that they are stupid. They think we're evil. and there's a qualitative difference in those two views of somebody. They would be quite happy sending us to camps, shooting us in the back of the head, because we are scum. We are not.
I have asked my socialist friends to reserve a luxury gulag for me, though. So I've got a good one reserved with the TV and stuff. Yeah.
This is what I say to my Chinese daughter-in-law. I say, look, when you take over the world, your people, can you make sure that we get a special number one gulag?
Yeah.
Because
but
for family.
You're right. But our ideas are liberal. We want diversity. We want diversity of business, of choice, of ideas. Those on the extreme left, you can't have diversity of ideas in a socialist or communist state. The ideas have to be mandatory in order to work.
Yeah.
And so there's a distinction between what we believe about political discourse and what they believe. And what they believe is that no one should be free to disagree with them, because in a socialist state you need everyone on board or in a gulag if they disagree. We don't want to live in that kind of world. I want to live in a world where people are free to engage in ideas and we all exchange in the voluntary exchange of goods, money and speech.
Well, I think one of the left's fundamental problems is that the facts of life are conservative. And given that is so, how do you police a culture where all the logic and truth is on the other people's side? Well, the only way you can do it is by effectively making the truth illegal, censoring it to the point where you cannot say what is true without suffering consequences.
But that's happening now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because when you do say the gender pay gap is actually a myth and equal pay is already guaranteed in law and this statistic is a useful statistic, the thought police are the very loud SJW in the cultural world. Yeah. So it's already happening, actually.
Only Kate Andrews, you, who else? I mean, you've got to be a woman to talk about the gender pay gap at all, haven't you?
In some ways, yes, unfortunately. Because if you went out and said what I said, they would just say, of course you'd say that, you're a man.
Yeah.
And then Kate and I, Kate does a fantastic job, and she's one of my heroes.
She
goes out and does it brilliantly, and I sometimes, I'm kind of the backup sometimes when she can't make it to the studio.
Yeah.
But when we do that, we are called all sorts of names, and someone's got to do it, though. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Low Tax Chloe.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlowe.
Censorship is a key issue here, particularly for people on the right. Do you think it was addressed adequately?
Definitely not. It was useful to name check Diamond and Silk. It was useful to check even politicians who had campaign ads that were shut down. But in every case, Zuckerberg was allowed to essentially dismiss the case and move on.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special, not un-Australian guest, Chloe Westley.
Good to be here.
Yep. Chloe, you are a star. I guarantee people will be wanting you back. They'll be clamouring. They will. Sorry, the special listening friend will be clamouring.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, hello, listener.
Yeah.
I'd love to do this again sometime.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it'll happen. So we were trying to decide, weren't we, in the interval, what we were going to talk about next. And you hit on a subject which I think is going to delight the special listening friend, Trump.
Donald J. Trump.
Are you a fan?
Oh, more so now than when he was first elected.
That's even more interesting position, actually.
When he was first elected, I was shocked and I was fascinated.
What, because you wanted Hillary?
No, I didn't really have any skin in the game.
Yeah.
I was an observer from the outside. But there was a part of me that thought this could either be the best or the worst thing for America, nowhere in between. And what really interested me was I'm a political geek, looking into the states that he won and the demographics. And there is a proportion of people in the UK and in America and potentially in Australia, although I think we have quite a stable society at the moment, that are forgotten people. And Robert Menzies, who was the founder of the Liberal Party in Australia, had this speech called The Forgotten People, which is brilliant, and go Google. And I think Trump reaches out to the forgotten people who feel as though politicians come along, take their money, take their taxes, and then waste it on all sorts of things, go on luxury flights around the world and go to conferences where they talk about how to fix problems that don't necessarily exist. This is a very exciting time. I think Trump has made some bad decisions, so I disagree with the tariffs that he's imposed. I'm a big believer I think tariffs are taxes, so I don't think that's going to be a good strategy.
Yeah.
But you can't deny that what he's achieved with North Korea is extraordinary. And I did get into a lot of trouble for saying this on Question Time. I thought my position was very reasonable. I said, if he can pull this off, if North Korea denuclearizes, absolutely, he should get the Nobel Peace Prize.
You were on
and
Question
I was
Time.
booed. Yes, I was.
Where
on Question
was
Time.
this?
I think I've forgotten.
But that was very brave.
It was
of you.
outside of London.
I'm pretty much of the view that I'm never going to do Question Time again, even if they beg me. You don't fight battles on the terrain of the enemy's choosing. And the best you can hope with is a barely grabbed draw. You can never get a win on Question Time if you're a Conservative or a Libertarian. I mean, Hitchens gets away with it only by playing the Hitchens game, where he's just this kind of crazy maverick. But otherwise, I mean, look, hats off to you for doing it.
Thank you. Well, I think it's important to go out there and make these arguments. The way that I see it is that if there isn't someone there arguing for lower taxes and a freer society and for Brexit, who will? I mean, who else other than some great think tanks like my own think tank, Taxpayers Alliance, and the IEA and Adam Smith Institute? I mean, who else out there is making the case for these ideas? I don't know. No, certainly not many Conservative MPs.
No. You'll probably find that in the world beyond the Question Time audience, which is a bunch of pinkos, as we know, people were actually nodding their heads and going, "Yeah, go girl, you go girl." Let's hope so. But back to Trump. I agree with you on tariffs, but I don't think we can make the best the enemy of the good. I think he's almost the best thing in my view about Donald Trump is that the people he annoys. He's even if he were a mediocre president, it would be worth it just for the misery he causes to everything from the Never Trumpers. I mean, I'm quite off Ben Shapiro because of his kind of whiny, persistent, never Trumpism.
I really like Ben Shapiro.
He's good in so many ways, but he's become
so fantastic. But yes, he is very, very much against.
Somebody said
Donald
he's become the right answer to Owen Jones.
I wouldn't impose that label on him. He's great. Well, I think Donald Trump is disruptive, and there is a very important distinction to make that I don't think is made often enough about politicians.
Yeah.
There's a difference between wanting to be friends with someone, going to the pub, wanting to be a friend of or engage with personally with someone, and respecting their political views. And I probably don't. I don't think we get along in person. I think some of the stuff he said is quite crass, but that's very different to what I think how I think he's behaving, how he's doing as a president. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, I think if we went to the pub now with Donald Trump, there'd be two problems. Number one, he wouldn't drink because he doesn't drink, does he?
It's very true. He's teetotal.
And number two, he's a bit like my mother in some ways, in that my mother is very easily distracted, and I've inherited this from her, and her brother's got it as well. There's what's known as the window of opportunity, and once you miss the window of opportunity, the interest wanes, and they're often. And I think possibly he just wouldn't be quite there. But as an operator, as the leader of the free world, the way he. Did you see the press conference after?
I did. He was enjoying it. Halfway through, he stopped and turned to Sarah Huckabee Finn and said, "Can we keep going? Let's keep going." He was clearly enjoying it.
How many other presidents would do that? They're also coached, aren't they? They're also formal. And I think the thing about Trump is he still doesn't quite believe he's president of the United States. I think he still thinks it's all a bit of a game, and he's all the better for it. By the way, I think that he's playful. He's enjoying it,
and he says what he thinks, which is very refreshing. We need more of that. And we need more people. Even if you disagree with his beliefs, I think he receives a lot of respect for being bold, saying what he thinks, following through with what he pledges to do, like on the deal with Iran. There were lots of people that criticized him for that. I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do, but he said he was going to do that. And you have to respect a politician that follows through with what they say they're going to do. And I think he'll probably win the next election.
I mean that's a very safe bet. Somebody pointed out to me that on the environment, for example, which is one of the one of the main theatres of cultural Marxism's global war on Western civilization. And Trump instinctively gets this. He hasn't come at it through the science. It's more that he just knows he doesn't like the wind turbines being imposed on his golf courses in Scotland. You know, they're reducing the value, probably. They're affecting the views. They're a pain. He senses that there's something dodgy about the people involved in it, and that's fine. Whatever route he's taken to reach this conclusion, he's actually turned it into reality by pulling out of the Paris summit, by rolling back on some of these environmental regulations which Obama put in, which were destroying the American economy.
And also, he's been very sceptical about the United Nations and how they spend American taxpayers' money. I would love to see him challenge the World Health Organization, because if you look into the way they've wasted taxpayers' money and their priorities, I mean, at the time of the Ebola crisis, they were doing this big campaign, anti-tobacco campaign in Southeast Asia, and it took them a week to respond to the Ebola crisis. If we have a World Health Organization, surely it's there to deal with health disasters. And they take first-class flights, and they jet set around and go to conferences, and they talk about how bad alcohol is and smoking, and we need to ban everything. And it's not right. And if anyone can challenge the World Health Organization, I think it's Donald Trump.
I think there are. You must have gone through this. I think everyone who's been to school has gone through this, where you don't know much about the world, but you know that there are these institutions like the United Nations, like the WHO, which is a branch of the UN, and there's this Parliament. You know, you kind of assume, and your teachers don't enlighten you on this matter, that these institutions are a good thing.
They're the goodies.
They're the goodies. They just are. It's self-evident. So
and businesses are the baddies, by the way. Public institutions, goodies. Businesses, baddies.
Yes.
That's what you're taught.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, they're half right on businesses being because most corporations now have been SJW converged, haven't they? They've been taken over by the people, diversity departments, the human resources.
Well, the largest businesses love organisations like the European Union because, I mean, it's in their business interest to do this. They lobby the EU for rules that work for them and screw over small businesses.
Yeah. Which is why the Confederation of British Industry, which is in fact a confederation of big business, and doesn't give a toss about the people who really make the economy work.
Well, exactly. If you keep all these regulations, they're a barrier to entry for competition.
Yeah.
They don't want competition. They want to keep the status quo and keep their power.
Yeah. So how do we fight back here? I mean, okay, you're doing the Lord's work at the Taxpayers Alliance. I'm doing the Lord's work on my podcast. But how are we going to fight against this tsunami of utter left-wing bollocks?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I know the solution isn't to be quiet.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. Sitting back and just being quiet isn't going to work. Tweeting, I'm not sure that's going to work either. It's a bit of an echo chamber. I think we need to start having conversations with people in the real world, in our real lives, and stop being scared of saying in the office, actually, you know what, I kind of like Trump. Or, yeah, I voted Brexit, what of it?
Yes.
Let's start being open. I think we're happy to tweet anonymously our support for these ideas, or to join Facebook groups, but actually saying to the people in our lives, our families and our friends, hey, have you thought about maybe this new idea? That's where it starts.
Yeah, I think you're right. In my disaster speech to those Cambridge kids, those that were still in the room by the end, I said to them that the question they should ask themselves is, what would Jacob do? Because actually I think Jacob is in many ways a model, and for at least three reasons. Number one, he is self-made. In other words, he's got what I call fuck off money. He's not in subservience to the man. He can speak his mind because he doesn't depend on anyone else. That's kind of important. And I think that the problem with too many Conservative politicians at the moment is that they've got no hinterland, they've got no real world experience, they've worked at Tory Central Office, and they're career safe and they're cowardly. Second thing, you've got to be absolutely true to Conservative principles. You don't jettison an idea here, a political principle there, in order to make yourself more attractive to an enemy which is always going to hate you because of who you are. I mean, conservative principles are the right principles.
They
It's
are.
just a given. And the third thing, I would argue, is that you've got to be funny. Funny is money. If you want to want to win over the people in the middle, the people who aren't obsessed with politics like us, you've got to make conservatism seem more part of your life, more culturally mainstream. Because I mean, look at the comedians that succeed at the moment, the people who are given these sinecures by the BBC. They only get those sinecures because they are left wing. Are you familiar with Frankie Boyle?
Yes.
So Frankie Boyle, do you know what he's like early on in his career?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Before my
So
time.
Frankie Boyle was a Glaswegian comic who just went further than most people would dare. He'd make disabled jokes, and he jokes that made you oh my god, did he just say that? And he was very, very good at it. And you admired his fearlessness because there was nothing kind of namby-pamby about him. But then Boyle realised that if ever he was going to take it to the next level, he would have to jettison all his kind of edginess, and he would have to start becoming politically correct. So he started tweeting about feminism and stuff, and he completely lost everything that made Frankie Boyle worthwhile. But at the price of, the devil showed him the whole world, and he took it.
That's sad.
Well, it is sad, but that is our culture.
There is, I think the cultural battle is very important as well. Music and poetry and art that is counter to the SJW narrative is very, very important. I mean, most people in the country voted to leave, almost the voting population.
Yeah.
The majority of the arts world campaign to remain.
Yeah.
And so I'm part of this new group called Artists for Brexit, where we're trying to challenge that stereotype and actually create some poetry and some writing and music that is representative of most of the country.
Yeah.
People that believe in democracy and freedom and are not afraid to say it. So the cultural battle is important as well. Have you heard Kanye West's song "Ye versus the People"?
No.
He has a song about saying he supports Trump.
Yes.
And saying that he thinks Trump's a bit disruptive, and the song's really interesting. It's a battle between him and another rapper, and he's saying, I want to have new ideas and I want to be different, and the other person saying, oh, but you betrayed us. And it's very, very interesting. I'd check it out.
Well, that is interesting because I've vacillated over the years about Kanye, in that I'm a massive, massive fan of his kind of mid-period albums. 808 and Heartbreaks, I think, was a very good one, and the one after that with the red cover, which I forget, but it was the one with the King Crimson sample on it. I mean, I really do like his music, but then he lost me.
Really?
I went to Glastonbury, and I worked my way into the middle of the crowd, in front of the main stage, and I wasn't on any drugs, unfortunately. Maybe they would have helped, I don't know. And he gave the shittest set I've ever seen a star play ever. Kanye. And I've been to a lot of gigs. It was all about Kanye. He invested about $1 gazillion on the stage lights, all of which were focused on Kanye, and it was all rapping. I don't listen to rap for the lyrics. I listen to it for the hooks and I want it to sound straight off the record. I don't want this to be just words.
Like a slam poetry.
Yeah, exactly.
I quite enjoy those, but it's not everyone's cup of tea.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now he's regained my respect. Not that he cares, probably. I think if you ask Kanye...
I think he'd be gutted, though, if he heard this and heard that you didn't like the concert. You'll probably get an apology.
He would not...
Your podcast is huge.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's probably listens to every one.
But I respect him so much more than... I don't use this word too often, but the cuck, Eminem. Eminem, who had it. He was so great. I mean, so many of his albums are so good. The one about the... Hush Little Baby, Don't Say a Word, that one.
He's great tunes.
He is just awesome. He's funny. He's and
very human as well. I find
totally
his lyrics are very human and relatable. I like
all the stuff about Kim, all the stuff about his daughter. He's brilliant, or he was. His new album is so shit. Have you heard it?
I haven't heard it. No.
Just
don't do it.
No.
Okay.
It's just like, I mean, I'd say that probably. Who did the Agadoo song? They probably did a better album than Eminem.
Really?
I'd say that probably Paper Lace did a better album than... In fact, you name any crap band from history.
Nickelback.
Nickelback
Yeah.
definitely did.
Although Nickelback did have some good songs. I feel bad for saying that now. Sorry, Nickelback. Sorry.
Do you like... what do you think about your own musicians? Are you a fan of Nick Cave?
I am. He's brilliant.
Yeah.
And last night I saw a great band called Sticky Fingers.
Australian
band. Fantastic. Really worth checking them out.
Actually, who is tedious though?
Who?
Midnight Bloody Oil.
Yeah, at the time though, that was the mood in Australia,
Was
because
it?
there was this time period where nobody talked about it,
Right.
and some terrible things happened to the Indigenous communities in Australia. And then I think in the 80s and 90s, there was a self-awareness, and this like at school we started learning about all the terrible things that happened, and there was a
Yeah, but
I think we needed that
how much of
cathartic
that
experience.
is true, by the way, because somebody's done some research, haven't they, into some of the claims by the what do you call them again? The original peoples,
Indigenous Australians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it keeps changing the term.
Well,
the correct term.
I wouldn't say that it's made up or anything. I think it was disgraceful what happened, but the way to make amends...
Not disputing that.
The way to make amends now, I think, is just educate and let's try and move on as Australians. And I'm very proud of my Australian heritage, and I think we have a healthy dose of nationalism. We are very, very proud. We have Australia Day on the 26th of January. We put Australian tattoos on our faces and wear the flag and everything. But it's a healthy dose of it, and it's about community. And it's about, if you moved to Australia, you would be invited to a barbecue and be made to feel welcome to be part of the country.
Oh, totally.
As opposed to, I think, this kind of pretend, stupid EU, we're all part of Europe BS, which isn't like that. And I think Britain has a chance now to get a healthy dose of nationalism back, because it can. I think I'm big on Aristotle, and there is a healthy medium for these things, right? And I think the level of love that Australians have for their country is probably about right. Of course, I would say that,
No,
but it
I
doesn't
think
go
you
so
have
far
to-
that we would apologize. So we're aware of our faults, but very proud of our strengths.
I think it's one of the areas because I've said this before, but it's because it's so totally true. I'm going to say it again. That there is almost no liberal in the world. I mean, I'm talking about left liberals, worse than an Australian metropolitan left liberal. The whininess. It's just something else. I was on the John Fane show. Yeah, we didn't hit it off,
Can't
and
imagine you
I
would.
was shocked. I was thinking, I went out looking for the land of Crocodile Dundee. I thought you were all going to have corks on your hats. I thought you were going to that isn't a knife. This is a knife, and so on. But instead, I found in the cities. I mean, in the outback, you were still fantastic. Bungie, the helicopter pilot, taking me to dive bomber Salty with his touching with the skid of his helicopter. That's all cool. But you're right that one of the few things that seems to have escaped the attentions of your metropolitan elite is that love of country, and I think it's a good thing. And we're going to see a bit of it, by the way, in the World Cup, because White Van Man, whom the liberal elite despises, he's going to be out there with his Cross of St George, and fair play to him.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so important to feel part of a community, because it's a social contract idea that we're all part of this. Well, I hope I'm now part of this country called
you
Great
are.
Britain.
Chloe, you are a friend.
And we all want to help each other and succeed together. And that family connection, that connection that binds us, it's very important. And I think the EU tries to take that away from countries and say, no, you're not allowed to be proud of your history and heritage or feel connected or have affinity to your nationhood. You've got to be a global European. It's people don't work that way. We belong somewhere, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Britain has a bit of a shift in identity when we leave the EU.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end, and also it means that we've got material to talk about in a future podcast. Thank you. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Chloe Westley of the Taxpayers Alliance. Thank you and goodbye.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
I want to actually take a couple of the references to Donald Trump from hip-hop. And then we're going to try to see if we can figure out why they like Donald Trump. Jay-Z said, I'm at the Trump International. Ask for me. Raekwon said, I'm the black Trump. They are comparing themselves to what he represents. His wealth, his achievement. Capitalism.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.